It's hard to put this into words, because honestly, I still don't know what I witnessed. But here we are. I have to share this, for the sake of science, culture, and maybe my own sanity. This video, this recording, might be deleted soon, so watch before it is. I'll start with my assignment to the joint human-alien base, which I had initially approached with cautious optimism. After all, who wouldn't be intrigued by humanity, the galaxy's new chaotic but oddly influential species? Their primitive technology often defies logic yet somehow manages to work, and their physical form is, let's just say perplexing. Now, humans are notorious for their unpredictability. They're clever, yes, but also reckless, traits not ideal in engineering or delicate repair work. Imagine my dismay when I, Chief Engineer Tlixeril of the Veterix Dominion, was paired with a human soldier, of all things, to assist in some critical maintenance. A soldier. Someone whose primary skill, I assumed, was destruction, not repair. He arrived late, typical, and lumbered into the hangar with a casual swagger that immediately grated on me. I mean, really, why must humans always act like they own every room they step into? And then I saw it. Slung over his shoulder was the largest, most ridiculous contraption I had ever seen. At first glance, it appeared like a weapon, long, metallic, with various attachments jutting out at odd angles. It hummed faintly, as if alive. "Yo, you must be HFY," he said, grinning like we were old friends. His teeth were unsettlingly white. "Let's get this baby fixed up, huh?" HFY. Not Tlixeril. My full name wasn't even that hard to pronounce. Humans always insist on abbreviating everything, as though time is such a limited resource for their brief lifespans. I took a deep breath and resisted the urge to correct him. "I assume you are the human designated for this task?" "Corporal Jackson Maddox," he said, setting the monstrous device down with a thud that reverberated through the floor. "But you can call me Jax." Jax. Maddox. It sounded like something a juvenile would name their favorite explosive. I kept my expression neutral, though I couldn't help glancing at the thing he brought with him. "What, exactly is that?" I asked, gesturing toward it. I couldn't keep the skepticism out of my voice. "This?" He patted it affectionately, like one might a beloved pet. "This is my big tool. Custom job. She does everything. Cutting, welding, scanning, even brewing coffee, though the coffee's hit or miss." I blinked slowly, processing this. Big tool. Big tool. The phrase alone was absurdly suggestive. Humans have a penchant for giving their equipment bizarre, often inappropriate names, but this was almost too much. "And you are certain it is suitable for delicate engine repair?" I asked, my tone as diplomatic as I could manage. "Oh, absolutely," he said confidently. "This baby's saved my ass more times than I can count. You'll see." Saved his. I decided not to ask. It didn't matter. What did matter was that I was now partnered with this overly casual, overly confident soldier and his absurd tool. I just had to endure the next few hours, complete the task, and then I'd never have to interact with him again. At least, that's what I thought. "All right," Jack said, flipping a switch on the tool that made it emit a low, vibrating hum. "Where's the problem?" "The main energy conduit has been compromised," I said, pointing toward the exposed panel on the far wall. "It requires recalibration and sealing. Precision work." "No problem," he said with an infuriating wink. A wink. I wasn't sure if it was a gesture of reassurance or some kind of strange human flirtation. Either way, I ignored it. He approached the conduit, his tool humming louder as he adjusted its settings. The lights flickered briefly, and for a moment, I felt a pang of anxiety. Perhaps I should have taken more control of the situation, but Jax's confidence had an odd effect. It made you want to believe he knew what he was doing. I stood back and watched as he angled the tool toward the conduit. Then it happened. The tool emitted a strange noise, a cross between a buzz and a chirp, and began vibrating in a way that was suggestive. That's normal," Jack said, glancing back at me as if to reassure me. "It always starts off a little feisty." feisty. I couldn't decide if he was joking or if this was simply the way humans talked about their technology. Either way, I couldn't stop staring at the tool, its movements almost hypnotic. Was this really how humans operated their equipment? It's got a learning curve, Jax added, adjusting some dials. But once you get the hang of it, it's a lifesaver. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed him. Still, I couldn't deny a growing curiosity. There was something impressive about the way he handled the tool, with a level of familiarity and ease that spoke to countless hours of practice. It was almost, no, I wasn't going to admire this. Not yet. For now, I would simply observe. And hope this bizarre human and his big tool wouldn't destroy the entire base. The malfunction was worse than I had anticipated. The energy conduit wasn't just misaligned, it was on the verge of a complete systems failure. Sparks occasionally flew from the exposed wiring, and the faint scent of ozone lingered in the air. The entire hangar's systems depended on this repair, and if we failed, the repercussions would ripple across the base. Jack stepped forward, his big tool humming ominously. I kept my distance, not entirely sure whether I feared the tool or the soldier wielding it more. He squatted by the conduit, examining it like a predator sizing up its prey. "Looks like someone's been neglecting her," he said, smirking. "Don't worry, I'll treat her right." I froze. "Excuse me?" "The conduit," he clarified, gesturing toward the equipment. "She's been through some rough times. But I've got her covered." Humans often referred to inanimate objects as she. I had encountered this quirk before, but hearing it in this context, with his overly familiar tone, left me feeling uncomfortably warm. It was absurd. Why would anyone personify a piece of equipment? More baffling was how he spoke about it as if it were a sentient being in need of affection. He adjusted the tool again, and this time it emitted a sharp click, followed by a low, steady vibration. The sound echoed through the hangar, almost rhythmic. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to focus on the conduit or the strange way Jax handled his equipment. "All right, let's see what we're working with here," he said, angling the tool toward the conduit. A faint beam of light shot out from the device, scanning the damaged components. The vibration intensified briefly before settling into a steady pulse. I couldn't stay silent any longer. "Is it supposed to vibrate like that?" Jax glanced at me, one brow raised. "What, this?" He patted the tool with a grin. "Yeah, it's part of the diagnostics. The vibration lets me know I'm hitting the sweet spot." I blinked. Slowly. "The sweet spot?" "You know where the problem is," he said, completely oblivious to the way my frills stiffened in mortified confusion. "It's all about finding the right angle and pressure. Gotta feel it out. Feel it out. Sweet spot." The phrases hung in the air like a dense cloud of awkwardness. Surely, he didn't realize how these statements could be interpreted, or maybe he did. I couldn't tell if humans were naturally this oblivious or if Jax was doing this on purpose to rattle me. I decided to focus on the conduit instead of his words. "The primary issue is with the energy modulator," I said, pointing toward the damaged section. "If we don't stabilize it, the entire system could cascade into failure." "Got it," Jax said. He adjusted another setting on the tool, and it emitted a high-pitched whine that made my frills twitch involuntarily. "All right, this should do the trick." He leaned closer to the conduit, positioning the tool with both hands. The sight was distracting. The way his muscles shifted under the strain, the faint sheen of perspiration on his brow, it was all too much. I shook my head, trying to refocus. Then the tool buzzed louder, emitting an unexpected series of rapid vibrations that made Jax laugh. "Oh, come on, behave!" he said, smacking the device lightly. "Is it malfunctioning?" I asked, stepping forward cautiously. "Nah, she's just temperamental," he said. "Takes a little coaxing sometimes." Coaxing. The words continued to pile up, each one more suggestive than the last. I could feel my bioluminescence flickering in what I desperately hoped was a subtle way. I didn't want to think about what this coaxing entailed, But my imagination refused to comply. Jax began welding a damaged section of the conduit, the tool now emitting a steady stream of light and heat. The precision was impressive, I had to admit. Despite the absurdity of the situation, and the ridiculousness of the tool itself, he worked with a level of skill and focus I hadn't expected from a human soldier. "You're good at this," I said reluctantly. He grinned without looking up. "Told you. Big tool like this, you gotta know how to handle it." I regretted the compliment immediately. The welding completed, Jax turned to me, his grin still firmly in place. "All right, your turn," he said, holding out the tool. I stared at it like he had just handed me a live grenade. "I don't think that's necessary." "Come on," he said, waving it slightly. "You're the chief engineer, right? You should get a feel for it. Trust me, once you try it, you'll wonder how you ever worked without one." The double meaning was too blatant to ignore. My frills stiffened again, and I could feel my bioluminescence flicker in an embarrassing pattern of unease. Still, I couldn't let him think I was intimidated. Taking a deep breath, I reached out and grabbed the tool. It was heavier than I expected, and the vibration sent an uncomfortable jolt up my arm. Jack stepped behind me, leaning in far too close for comfort as he adjusted my grip. "You want to hold it steady," he said, guiding my hands. "Like this." The warmth of his proximity was distracting. Very distracting. I focused on the conduit, trying to ignore the fact that I could feel his breath on my frills. "There you go," he said, stepping back. "Now give it a little pressure." The vibrations intensified as I pressed the tool against the damaged section. It buzzed in a way that felt almost alive, and I couldn't help but flinch slightly. Jax laughed. "Don't be shy," he said. "It's built to take a beating." My bioluminescence flared in what I hoped he wouldn't recognize as mortification. This was going to be a very, very long repair session. As the repair work continued, it became increasingly clear that this task was not going to be as straightforward as either of us had hoped. The energy conduit systems were deeply intertwined with other components, each more temperamental than the last. Every adjustment we made seemed to trigger a new problem, and the longer we worked, the more absurd the situation became. Jax, of course, seemed completely unfazed. If anything, he looked like he was enjoying himself. His big tool buzzed and hummed in his hands as he fiddled with its various settings, each adjustment producing a new noise or vibration. I tried not to pay attention, but it was impossible to ignore. The sounds alone were distracting. "All right," he said, crouching by the conduit once more. "Let's see if we can stabilize this thing." I watched as he pressed the tool against one of the damaged components, its vibrations intensifying as it made contact. He leaned in, squinting at the screen on the device, and muttered something under his breath. Then, without warning, the tool emitted a loud, almost musical tone that echoed through the hangar. "What was that?" I asked, my frills flaring slightly. Jax grinned. "Oh, that's just a resonance scan. It's checking for structural integrity." "Resonance scan?" I repeated, skeptical. "Is it supposed to sound like that?" "Sure," he said. "Means it's working. Don't worry, I've got this under control." He didn't look like he had anything under control. The tool continued to buzz and whine as he worked, its noises growing louder and more erratic. Sparks flew from the conduit, and I couldn't help but take a step back, my instincts screaming that something was about to go terribly wrong. Jax, however, seemed completely unfazed. He adjusted the tool again, this time activating a new attachment that extended from the side of the device with a sharp click. The attachment resembled a long, thin probe, and as it began to glow faintly, I felt my bioluminescence flicker in alarm. "What is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "This?" he said, holding up the tool. "It's a plasma stabilizer. Great for pinpointing weak spots." "Pinpointing weak spots?" I echoed, my mind struggling to process the absurdity of the situation. "And you're sure it's safe?" "Safe as houses," he said, flashing another one of his infuriating grins. "Trust me, I've done this 1,000,000 times." I wasn't convinced. But before I could voice my concerns, Jax pressed the tool against the conduit once more. The vibrations intensified, and the device emitted a series of rapid beeps that sounded almost triumphant. "There we go," he said, stepping back and gesturing toward the conduit. "See? Easy." The conduit, however, did not look easy. In fact, it looked worse than before. The vibrations from the tool had caused one of the smaller components to come loose, and as it clattered to the floor, I felt my frills stiffen in frustration. "Easy?" I repeated, glaring at him. "You've just dislodged an essential component." Jack shrugged, completely unfazed. "It happens sometimes. Don't worry, we'll fix it." Will fix it? I said, incredulous. "This wouldn't need fixing if you had been more careful in the first place." "Relax," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's all part of the process. Trust me, I know what I'm doing." I was beginning to doubt that very much. But before I could argue further, he crouched down to retrieve the fallen component, his tools still buzzing faintly in his other hand. As he inspected the piece, his brow furrowed in concentration, I couldn't help but notice the way his muscles shifted under his uniform. No. I wasn't going to let myself get distracted by that. I shook my head, trying to refocus on the task at hand. "All right," Jack said, straightening up and holding the component out to me. "Think you can reinstall this while I keep the conduit stable?" I hesitated, my frills twitching slightly. "Fine," I said, snatching the component from his hand. "But if this doesn't work, it's on you." "Deal," he said, grinning again. "But it'll work. Trust me." I wasn't sure why he kept saying, "Trust me," as if that was supposed to be reassuring. But I didn't have much of a choice. Taking the component, I carefully inserted it back into the conduit, making sure to align it properly with the surrounding systems. As I worked, I could feel Jax watching me, his gaze almost appreciative. "You're pretty good at this," he said, his tone surprisingly genuine. I glanced at him, unsure whether he was being sincere or if this was another one of his strange human attempts at humor. "Of course I'm good at this," I said, my voice sharp. "I am a chief engineer." "Fair point," he said, still watching me. "But you've got a nice touch. Delicate. Precise." My bioluminescence flared slightly, and I cursed myself for the reaction. Why did humans insist on making everything sound so suggestive? Ignoring him, I focused on the conduit, carefully securing the component in place. As I worked, the tool in Jax's hand continued to buzz and hum, its noises growing louder and more erratic. I glanced at him, my frills twitching in irritation. "Is that thing supposed to be making so much noise?" I asked. "Yeah, it's fine," he said, adjusting the tool slightly. "Just means it's working hard." "Working hard," I repeated, my voice dripping with skepticism. "It sounds like it's about to explode." "Relax," he said again, flashing yet another grin. "It's built to handle the pressure." I wasn't so sure about that. But before I could argue further, the tool emitted a loud pop, followed by a series of rapid beeps that sounded almost celebratory. "See?" Jack said, holding up the tool triumphantly. "Told you it would work." I stared at him, my frills stiffening in disbelief. "You've dislodged another component." Jax glanced at the conduit, then back at me, his grin faltering slightly. "Okay, so maybe it still needs a little fine-tuning." "A little fine-tuning?" I said, my voice rising. "Do you even know what you're doing?" "Of course I do," he said, his grin returning. "You just gotta trust the process." I was beginning to hate that phrase. But before I could say anything more, the tool buzzed again, its vibrations growing louder as Jax adjusted its settings. As I watched him work, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of frustration and something else. Admiration? Curiosity? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that this human and his ridiculous, big tool were going to drive me insane. The repairs had entered a stage that could only be described as pure chaos. The energy conduit, already hanging by a thread, was now triggering failures in adjacent systems. Warning lights flashed intermittently, alarms blared in the distance, and the room vibrated with the ominous hum of a system teetering on collapse. It was a situation that demanded precision and composure, qualities I was quickly realizing were not this human's strengths. Jax, however, seemed to thrive in the chaos. He moved with an unsettling ease, his big tool whirring and sparking as he made adjustments on the fly. The device emitted an increasingly bizarre array of noises, buzzing, clicking, even a sound that could only be described as a high-pitched chirp. Each sound made my frills twitch in agitation. "All right, this is gonna get messy," Jack said, crouching by the conduit again. He adjusted a dial on his tool, which responded with a dramatic surge of vibrations. "We're gonna need to reroute the flow before stabilizing it." "That's a delicate procedure," I said, stepping closer. "Are you certain your tool is equipped for that level of precision?" Jax glanced up at me with a smirk. "Oh, it's more than equipped. Watch and learn." Before I could argue, he pressed the tool against one of the primary conduits. The vibrations intensified, and the device began emitting a rapid series of beeps that sounded distressingly like a countdown. My frills stiffened as a new wave of sparks erupted from the machinery. "Is it supposed to do that?" I demanded, my voice rising above the cacophony. "Totally normal," Jax replied, though his grin faltered slightly. He adjusted another dial, and the tool emitted a loud pop, followed by a low hum that reverberated through the room. "Okay, maybe not totally normal, but I've got this." "You've got this?" I repeated, incredulous. "The entire system is destabilizing. If you make one wrong move—" "I won't," he interrupted, his tone surprisingly calm. "Trust me, I've done this before." That phrase again. Trust me. It was becoming increasingly difficult to do so, especially as the tool's vibrations grew even more erratic. I watched in a mix of horror and fascination as he angled the device toward a secondary component, the glow from its attachments casting strange shadows on the wall. "All right, this should do the trick," he muttered, mostly to himself. The tool emitted a sharp whir, and a thin beam of light shot out, slicing through a tangle of damaged wires. Jax moved with surprising precision, cutting and sealing the connections in a way that seemed almost graceful. For a moment, I found myself staring, not at the tool, but at him. His focus, his confidence, the way he seemed to move as if the chaos around him didn't exist. It was impressive. Annoyingly so. I shook my head, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. "Your turn," Jack said suddenly, holding the tool out to me. I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Take it," he said, his grin returning. "I can't reach the stabilizer from here. You'll have to do it." I hesitated, my frills flickering uncertainly. The tool vibrated in his hands, emitting a low, almost suggestive hum. The thought of holding it again made me uneasy, but I couldn't let him see that. Taking a deep breath, I reached out and grabbed the device. The vibration sent an immediate jolt up my arm, making me flinch slightly. Jax noticed and chuckled. "Don't worry, you'll get the hang of it. Just hold it steady." "Hold it steady," I muttered under my breath, mimicking his tone. "Right." I positioned the tool near the stabilizer, its vibrations growing stronger as it neared the damaged component. My grip tightened as I adjusted the settings, trying to mimic the movements I had seen Jax perform. The device buzzed louder, and for a moment, I thought I might actually succeed. Then the stabilizer emitted a burst of sparks, and the tool's vibrations surged unexpectedly, making it nearly impossible to control. I stumbled back, my bioluminescence flaring in alarm as Jax burst into laughter. "Okay, maybe not like that," he said, stepping forward to steady me. His hands brushed against mine as he adjusted my grip, and I felt an involuntary flicker of heat ripple through me. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, my frills stiffening in frustration. "You're doing fine," he said, his tone uncharacteristically encouraging. "Just gotta feel it out. It's all about finding the right rhythm." The double meaning in his words was impossible to ignore, and I felt my bioluminescence flare again, this time in mortification. I focused on the stabilizer, determined to finish the task and end this absurd interaction as quickly as possible. Okay, now just a little pressure, Jack said, his hands still guiding mine. You're almost there. The tool emitted another high-pitched whine as I pressed it against the stabilizer. My grip tightened, and I could feel the vibrations intensify, each one resonating through my arm in a way that was unsettling. But after a moment, the device emitted a triumphant ping, and the stabilizer flickered to life. See? Told you it would work, Jack said, his grin widening. I exhaled slowly, my frills relaxing slightly. It's not fixed yet, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. There's still the matter of the coolant system. Right, he said, stepping back and adjusting his tool once more. Let's get to it. I watched as he moved toward the coolant system, his confidence as infuriating as ever. Despite my annoyance, I couldn't deny that he was capable. His methods were unconventional, chaotic even, but they worked. Somehow. As Jax began working on the coolant system, his tool emitting a new series of noises, I found myself wondering if all humans were like this. Reckless, unpredictable, and yet strangely effective. It was maddening. And intriguing. Mostly maddening.